So welcome everybody to today's Wicked Lunch, where we're going to be discussing AI in financial services. This is all part of the activities of the UKFin network. So UKFin is an EPSRC funded Network Plus grant that aims to tackle some of the so-called wicked problems or long-term persistent challenges in the UK's financial services sector, right? So if we have a look at some of the problems that we focus on, it's things like financial inclusion and well-being, sustainable finance, and today's focus, which is on coping with potentially game-changing emerging technologies, and in particular AI, quantum computing, and blockchain. And today's event is all about AI. And what we try and do at UKFin is encourage collaborations between academic and non-academic partners to tackle some of these persistent challenges, right? So if you would like to see a detailed overview of the research agenda that we've come up for the UKFin network, you can find it there at that URL. There's a little summary on the left-hand side as well. Today we're going to be, and in fact for a few months now, we're going to be having the so-called spotlight on these game-changing technologies, which is to say that for example, in the funding calls and so on that we offer, we're going to be particularly looking out for proposals and so on that address these emerging technologies, right? Game-changing technologies. So here's a wonderful bit of interactive art that Jenny Leonard came up with during our last event where we launched the research agenda. And basically, we'll be tackling all of the issues that you see here on the left third of this diagram. So our panel today, we're very pleased to welcome Maryam Torshizi, who is the CEO and founder of DeepSearch Labs. So Maryam has a background in electrical and electronic engineering with a particular focus on signal processing, and she's worked as a quantitative researcher, data scientist, and consultant. Then we have David McMillan. He is professor of finance and head of accounting and finance at the University of Stirling. So he has various interests in quantitative finance, including, for example, forecasting, asset returns, and volatility, and so on. And then finally, we have Sarah Sabbaghan, who's research lead at Amplified Global, which is an innovative AI startup dedicated to improving the creation and accessibility of legal and financial documents. So Sarah has a PhD in information systems from the University of Auckland and has previously actually been an assistant professor at Warwick, where she specialized in areas such as user interface research and research methodologies and data analytics, right? And I myself, I'm Will Knottenbelt. I'm one of the UKFin co-investigators, and I'm a professor in the Department of Computing at Imperial College London. So welcome to all of the panel, and welcome to all of you online. We're going to start with a bit of a discussion with the panel, and then we'll move to opening the floor to take some questions through you. So if you have any Q&A or anything occurs to you while the conversation's going on, just drop it in the chat and we'll get to it later, right? So I wonder then, perhaps I could start with Sarah and just maybe ask you a little bit about what you're seeing in terms of the state of adoption of AI in financial services and what you think maybe is driving acceptance or perhaps hesitation amongst businesses and regulators and consumers.
Thank you, William, and thank you for having me here today. I'm just going to go briefly through a few key concepts about within AI adoption, and Dave and Maryam, please feel free to jump in at any point. Um, I think one of the biggest concerns for financial institutions is whether AI is within legal and regulatory requirements. And I think there are several issues here. One, AI is evolving faster than regulators can keep up. Within AI systems, particularly those driven by ML or deep learning, they are just evolving at such a rapid pace. And financial regulators, however, they're more cautious and they move a bit more cautiously, as they need to, thoroughly assess risks and gather public and industry input, and then align policies across, different jurisdictions. So by the time a new law or regulation is enacted, that technology may already been evolved, making parts of the regulation either outdated or ineffective. Another is that, well, financial AI applications are constantly expanding and evolving. So for instance, AI is being used in, high frequency trading, fraud detection, within credit scoring, blockchain based finance, and a number of areas. And each of these areas require different legal considerations, and regulators may struggle to define consistent guidelines across all AI driven financial activities. Another thing that we've recently seen quite a bit is the lack of standardization in global AI regulations, of course, we all know who I'm talking about. So within this AI regulations there's like different across different jurisdictions. We have the EU Act, we have the US federal AI regulations, we have China on the other hand with, coming in with their own AI innovations. And this, regularly inconsistency makes it difficult for financial institutions to scale AI solutions across different markets. And also, compliance burden may also slow AI innovation. Because, well, AI regulations are unclear or constantly, evolving. Many financial firms may hesitate to fully deploy AI-driven systems. And companies may spend millions in legal compliance costs to ensure AI meets regulatory requirements, that this could possibly slow innovation.
Yeah, that's a very good point. I mean, just yesterday we actually had a talk at Imperial from the CEO of Lloyds Bank, and that they're spending £4 billion completely transforming their banking systems, right? And one of the things that they would also like to do is to put a lot more AI and so on into, for example, like their customer service and so on. But they're finding it's a really tricky thing to deploy in practice, and they've actually set up an AI center of excellence, and they're, for example, deploying a whole fleet of AI ethicists and so on. So you're absolutely right. It's a tricky area at the moment. David, I mean, from the point of view of the consumer and so on, there are a lot of issues around trust and transparency and explainability, aren't there?
Yeah, so thanks, Will, and Sarah. So I guess just to kind of put a bit of background about myself. So I come from a more of a financial markets background, and also, and as Will said at the beginning, a bit of an econometrics background, if that's allowed, when we talk about AI. Um, and so I look at it from that perspective first, and I see that the kind of trust issues and the transparency issues that arise around financial markets are the same as you get with regard to financial services on the other side. And I'll explain that in a second. And of course, this applies more broadly to other areas where AI is used. So within financial markets, just to give a very brief background, there's lots of academic research that say we can use AI and it will improve outcomes for customers so they can use AI models and it will improve their performance of forecasting models, so it'll improve their portfolio holding and so on. Uh, and with that weight of evidence that we've seen, there's perhaps less adoption than you might expect. Now, we know within financial markets, with high frequency trading and derivatives trading and so on, it's dominated by algorithmic trading and AI and so on. But for longer term portfolios, it's less common. And the question is why? And those questions within financial markets is this issue of trust and transparency and explainability, and what does it all mean? So, what variables are going into the model? What is the outcome, and do you believe the outcome? And why did you get that outcome? And so when we link that back to financial services, so for example, credit scoring, it's the same kind of issue. So when we look at things like credit scoring for individuals, the variables that I might use in econometrics is the data. So what is the data? And from the consumer's perspective, it's the personal data that's being used and put into this machine. So what personal data do I have to provide that goes into this? And then what is the results that come out? So whether I apply for a loan, what data do you need? And if I get rejected for the loan, for example, do I trust that my data has been handled in a sensitive and proper manner and that the result is correct? The kind of the computer says no type idea. And so to try to link that, and this is where I kind of I think there are lots of open questions to try to link it, whether it's financial markets or financial services. There's this issue of explainable AI, so the XAI approach, which is trying to put some understanding into that so-called black box. But the question that I have and that others have is, what is it actually explaining? So in terms of, for example, in econometrics, we have things like R-squareds and t-statistics and mean squared errors and all those kind of things. And now with AI, we have our SHAP values and our Lime and so on. And so for people engaged in this area, we understand what those are. And they tell us that this variable contributes so much to this outcome. For the consumer, for the person sitting at the other side, that doesn't explain anything. It doesn't tell them why they got the outcome that they did, whether it's a portfolio of investment or whether it's applying for a loan or whether it's applying any other kind of issue. So there's that issue of are we explaining the right thing? And that's potentially holding back adoption at the consumer level. And the question is explainability the same thing as trust? And I would suggest it's not. And so that consumers don't yet trust what we are perhaps saying them. And we can look at that a bit further. I don't know if you want me to talk any more, but we can kind of then conjoin when we look at financial services and financial markets together and the products that are offered to consumers in terms of, for example, you've got the pension funds, the SIPs, you've got ISAs, you've got all those kind of things. And increasingly, the selection of assets in those can be done through AI. And you have robo traders and all those kind of things. And then it's then convincing consumers that where they put their money into these financial products is actually safe. Do they understand them? Are they being burnt by them? So we see that with things like CFDs, where consumers lose money. Is there sufficient understanding? And I think that's
absolutely. I mean, the financial service industry, I think, has always been a little bit opaque when it comes to, for example, explaining why, for example, an application for credit or whatever is rejected, right? But I think there would be an opportunity here to improve that. And certainly when it comes to things like what investments, for example, are you being offered and why, I don't see any downside to explaining to people exactly what the reasoning behind that is. And you're right, maybe there's an opportunity through explainable AI to do that. I just wonder if we can move on to another point, maybe bringing you in, Maryam. So, I mean, DeepSearch Labs is really on the front lines of AI adoption in financial services and other industries, right? And what are you seeing in terms of what companies want to do when they integrate AI? Because, of course, they have a choice of building some in-house AI tech, which perhaps keeps their data more private, and the other option that they have, of course, is to use some ready-made third-party API or application, but that comes with possibly less privacy for their data and queries. So what are you seeing?
Yeah, so I think first time ChatGPT launched was 2022 November, and 2023 was a year where everybody was doing POC. So lots of people didn't know what they could do, so they were doing a lot of testing. And financial systems, then by end of 2023, 2024, they had a whole plan where front office cannot use large language models and any of these AI applications, whereas like you can use them for coding in the back office, and you can use them in the middle office for some reporting, some summarization, but it's all internal. Like when it comes to summarization, it's all internal use. You cannot use that with end clients. So they were very strict about what can be done with these models. And then in 2024, you started seeing individual teams within different financial services starting to explore different sorts of machine learning algorithms and large language models and generative algorithms in particular. And the use cases were more dedicated to that individual team. Now, there was a whole push in 2023, end of 2023, 2024, where people were saying that they want to build in-house, like the companies that led them were Schroders, for example, and JP Morgan, where they created their own internal GPT, training the models on their own data. And it's not very clear whether they're using any Azure services or they've built in-house. I know that for Schroders, they've actually separated it, but those are very big companies who have a lot of money. A lot of financial firms, especially mid-level, I would say they tend to mid-cap, they tend to not build in-house, but they were trying to build, and they now are coming back in full force saying they like to buy applications, which is fascinating because I think they did a whole analysis on cost versus maintenance versus hiring versus all the changes that are happening in the market with all the new models that are coming out, and deployment is quite difficult, as you mentioned. And so like they're now looking to buy instead of build in-house. Now on buying, there is also strict rules on what kind of data can go into these systems. For example, a lot of the financial services allow brokers research into the system, but they don't allow their own ideas. Like, for example, if they have investment idea to go into, like they have an investment memo or some sort of a webcast that they've created on their opinions about the market, they want to allow those to go into the systems, regardless of what those systems are, whether they're like OpenAI or our software. But something like broker research, they are happy to put those in and do analysis. But there's a whole worry about hallucinations and accuracy. And I think one of the things that we are seeing is that a lot of the market does not want to use raw models anymore, and they rather have full application that has worked on the data, that makes sure that there's zero information inaccuracy coming through, and there's referencing for everything, and they like to be able to check those references to ensure that the results are correct, and they like to be able to work with people so that they can adjust features or add new features. Whereas like I think having in-house teams, even though it is great, it's very costly. Like running a specific model, like let's say a 617 billion DeepSeek, is for one machine you will be paying $140, and you would need multiple machines in order to run that, right? That's $140 per hour, right? So it's for one machine you're spending £1 million, right? So you would need multiple machines to run such kind of models. So then you need specialized people who would know, okay, should I be using quantized version? Should I be using distilled version, which is not really a DeepSeek? It's another model trained on DeepSeek outputs. Should I be using how many parameters should I be using? And what is the cost associated? So there's a lot of variables. And I think a lot of them are moving away from like just building in-house and trying to like just buy ready-made solutions, specialized, basically. That's what I'm seeing now. This is a new trend.
Hey, exciting. Thank you. I mean, yes, it's very interesting. You can spend a lot of time choosing the right model, training the right model, making sure the prompts are right in order to minimize hallucinations. and so on. But I suppose at some point a decision needs to be made as to whether, for example, a Gen AI application can operate in entirely an independent kind of way, or whether it needs human in the loop, like human supervision. Right? I don't know if you have an opinion on that, or perhaps Sarah, if you have an opinion on that as well.
I can go. I think there's a lot of emphasis on human in the loop, but there's also a bit of emphasis on automation. So there's a balance. So a lot of the companies are happy to replace juniors and some of the junior works with automation, but they're not willing to replace seniors with any sort of automation, because they believe that the seniors would have the industry knowledge and therefore they will be able to have subjective views about something. And I think that's where the human in the loop comes into play. That's where I've seen it, but I'm not really sure what Sarah believes.
Well, Maryam, in a way, I agree with you in that there needs to be a balance. Just to provide some context, I'll share an example of what we do at Amplify Global. And just to give you a bit of context, I'm going to start with, the concept of intelligibility, just to walk you through. So intelligibility is a fundamental legal requirement for all consumer communications. So for over 50 years, the Consumer Rights Act has been mandated that written information must be clear and comprehensible to consumers. So intelligibility is measured by assessing how likely readers are to understand and use the information presented to them, and ensuring intelligibility is critical across all sectors, particularly in legal and financial services, where complex language can create barriers to, consumer understanding. So whether you're drafting agreements, writing contracts, or producing consumer-facing materials, assessing intelligibility helps organizations ensure that essential information is accessible and actionable, so that consumers are able to understand the document and that they were able to make informed decisions. Okay, this brings us to Amplify. So Amplify is an online tool developed by us at Amplify Global with direct innovative support from the Financial Conduct Authority, FCA. And this relationship is super key and important to what we do. So Amplify is designed to simplify legal and financial documents. And by leveraging AI and machine learning, Amplify integrates established linguistic frameworks, to enhance clarity and effectiveness of any consumer communication. So Amplify is uniquely designed as it simplifies documents step by step. It's helping users to improve intelligibility, review change, and track progress within the audit trail. Okay, so organizations here use Amplify to assess the intelligibility of consumer-facing communications. They identify and mitigate compliance risks with document portfolios. They highlight high-risk tasks and provide simplification prompts or suggestions. And they generate reports to demonstrate improvements and understand risk in consumers and regulatory compliance. So how does AI and human collaboration work within this context? So here, within AI automation, we use it to instantly scans, categorize text, retrieve relevant information, automates, knowledge discovery, reducing the human workload. It utilizes NLP to extract insights from documents. And then Amplify also provides intelligent suggestions for complex language, and provides novel intelligibility risk scores through ML. And by automating these tasks, then it kind of reduces the manual workload by improving accuracy and compliance. Here, human review is key because with editors, they validate and assess Amplify simplifications for compliance and when they want to finalize decisions. This ensures that the content is, governance within ensuring effectiveness of the content and governance and reporting. So here, human review is really important. And also, looking at the AI findings and be able to validate this through research and, precision and relevance, how relevant are these findings. So why does this work? And I think this is where the combination of, AI efficiency and human expertise is really important, because here we're not replacing, you know, people, because this is one of the biggest fears, is that is AI going to take over my job? And here it's about enhancing the effectiveness by automating, information retrieval, allowing them to focus on high value analysis, which is also cost effective for firms. And also, it kind of ensures that Amplify generates insights that are actionable, trustworthy, and legally sound. So you need that human in the loop to be able to assess this.
Yeah, I
So
mean,
also that reduces, yeah.
human review in this case has to be quite specialized, right? Because in simplifying some language, you could change the legal meaning of something, and then you would possibly need somebody who has legal expertise to pick that up, right?
Exactly. So it's the balance between the two, which I think is very key.
Yeah, very good, very good. I wonder if we can move on to another major concern, which is around data and data privacy. There's been a lot of things in the news about LLMs, being sued for copyright violations, people not really understanding what's happening with their user queries, people who are building models not quite sure what's happening to the training data that they're putting into the models. I mean, where does this technology actually leave us in that respect?
So I think you can look at LLMs in two ways. You can look at them as a dynamic system where continuous training happens on the data that you're feeding it, or you can look at them as a deterministic system where it is used just like any other algorithm on a set of data, but in a closed environment with no access to complete data sets, right? Just whatever data that you're feeding it, it needs to return something. And I think the deterministic system can definitely be used in financial firms where the dynamic part is taken away, i.e. like if you have a feedback loop that grabs data from the data of the users, for example, that the users input, then you need to turn that off. Then I think that would work in financial firms. Whereas like when you have this continuous feedback loop that is used to train your data on the internal data, then that creates issues. And so a deterministic system is what I call it, is much more friendly towards the financial firms. They can use it safely, but they just need to understand how the segregation of the data happens. They need to understand the architecture. So it's good to have somebody who has some sort of an expertise in that area to sit down, and then you can basically go through your permissioning system, which is what we are doing. So we separate like internal data from our data. And the dynamic system can be there or can just disappear. It depends on the need of the end user. And we can create just a software as a service, basically, where it is just on the internal data and no ingestion of the internal data is used in the training, for example. And then I think, but that generally happens with AI teams that companies have created, and also compliance teams. So they sometimes, and they're a mix of the two. So they sit down and they go through everything that you've got, like how does your API access point looks like what kind of models are you using? Is it your own model? Are you saving chat history of individuals' questions, or is it like private? Is your LLM private, or are you using something like ChatGPT, like API access points? So like it all depends on how you've set up the system, basically. But it is possible to go through compliance if you have the right system in place.
Yeah, great. So I suppose data privacy is like just one example of the kind of risk that we might encounter like in a financial market, but obviously there are also the risks of actually, for example, using AI traders and robo advisors and so on within a financial markets context, right? So I don't know how you feel about that, David.
Yeah, so I think when you're looking at the risks associated with AI within financial markets, there are two levels at which we can consider them. So obviously the individual level, and then there's the wider issue of financial stability, which they can have an impact upon. So looking at the individual level, I mean, one thing where AI has a good opportunity, and Sarah's already, in a sense, picked up on it to a degree, is this issue of financial literacy. Now, often we always think of financial literacy in terms of people understanding discounting and so on, and that should help them get a pension and how much they're paying on their credit card debt. But it's also can be more developed than that when they're getting into these financial products. So when you can go onto YouTube right now and Google AI trading, and it will come up with a ton of videos that will try to convince you to use a particular robo trader or a particular AI technique, algorithm, and so on, to trade, and you'll be a millionaire by the end of the day. So it's important to understand those risks and the risks that people take. So I already mentioned it before, but contract for differences and the amount of leverage that goes into those, because a lot of the AI tools will use those products to try and sell, because most of the time the consumer loses and the provider wins. There's a 66% chance that you as a consumer will lose money on those products. I mean, we see it all the time with crypto as well. I mean, without going into Hawk Tuah girl before Christmas, there was obviously, it's not illegal, or at least it hasn't been proven to be illegal as of yet. But those are issues that allow people in this kind of area to lose money, and that undermines the trust in them. So when people are thinking about, there are lots of advantages and lots of benefits for AI within this sphere, but people lose trust in them. And obviously, on an individual level, it can lead to debt, losing money, losing jobs, losing more, and so on. So there's that issue. There's also a kind of wider market issue. If we think about financial flash crashes, which happen because of herding behavior within AI algorithms. There's a history of automated trading in a more general sense that has caused financial problems. You can go back to 1987 with portfolio insurance. If you can think of that as a very early idea of algorithmic trading. The 2008 crash was brought about by a lot of algo trading and derivatives and so on. So there are potential downsides. And it's education, and it goes back to the same point about transparency and trust and understanding and explainability, so we can kind of get the benefits and people can avoid these more pitfalls.
Brilliant, thanks. Sarah or Maryam, do you want to chip in there, or should we open it up for questions? I will take that as an invitation for questions. Right. So John had an interesting comment. He said it's interesting thinking about junior staff being replaced by automation, leaving just the senior staff. Isn't it interesting that those closest to the hiring and firing decisions choose to keep their job functions and not the more junior job functions, perhaps forgetting that they were once junior staff, right? What are the long-term implications does that have for the workforce, and where are these well-experienced and qualified senior staff going to come from in the future if there's no pipeline or career route for the more junior talent, right? I think this is something that must be concerning a lot of young people at the moment. I don't know who wants to take that one on.
I think that came from my comments, so maybe I could clarify it a little. What I meant by what I said is that's what the financial firms want, but that's far from what is coming, basically. Teams within financial firms want. That's far from what's actually coming. I think what's actually coming is a lot of cost saving. Cost of the operation of financial firms is quite high. Generally, people's cost is really high. And I think it's not just juniors, but the seniors as well. But what I'm seeing from the teams that I speak with is that they would like to divert the attention of the juniors from what the mundane tasks that they're doing and focus them on more interesting things that could add value. That's what they say when they say replacing some of the junior tasks with automation. It's actually to add some value, basically. But this also means that in the market, there will be a huge competition on recruitment. They are going to hire more talented, more like better juniors, basically, than like more tech-savvy juniors, where they can play with models, they can work with softwares, rather than just juniors that are not maybe very good at tech. And I think that's what's going to happen, at least on the junior level. So there will still be hiring, but there won't be like as many as they would at the moment. And it would be very selective process. But yeah, that's what I wanted to say. Sorry, you can. Sorry.
That's all right. Just to jump in, I think an important concept is task elasticity, because when you look at not just people, but it's the tasks in itself, because certain tasks, they have, we're looking at low elasticity where, AI can replace certain tasks, like putting in, routine, driven roles or data entry or call center supports, right? But then we have the task that is, high elasticity, which is that, the AI complements human work, which some of the work that we do with human in the loop. So I think it's important that we kind of define these tasks and the boundaries of these tasks, because it kind of does, in a way, kind of impact how we're looking at talent and where we need AI, and kind of the areas that we're looking for gaps within the task force as well. So I think it's a bit of both.
Just to add a quick point to that, from my perspective. So I talk a lot to the professional accounting bodies about what they're looking for in future. And obviously everyone says, well, bookkeeping, oh no, that will be taken over by AI, so we don't need to train any more bookkeeping students. And what the accounting bodies will tell us is that's not the case. That yes, the AI will take over these roles, but the students still have to know it all. So they have to learn as if the machines didn't exist, first of all. So they learn bookkeeping by hand, even though when they get into the job, they won't use it, because they should have all these other skills that Sarah's just mentioned. So they have to do a bit of both. So they still have to learn the basics as well as update their skills with the necessary technical powers as well.
Yeah, I guess it's just like in computer programming with students. When they first learn, they should do it without AI, and then when they actually get into industry, they'll probably be using it, right? I just wonder, you think of all the recent government announcements about, we have these aspirations for the UK to be the, AI makers, not AI takers, right? What do you think government should be doing to basically support, the UK as kind of like a global AI leader? Is there any particular initiative or whatever that you think that they could do that might actually either help your sector of the industry or the UK in general?
So we work with a lot of government entities, and actually there's a lot of bureaucracy on that front, on how and what to use, and they've got these supplier lists that you need to be a part of, and if you're not on part of those supplier lists, then you got to wait 9 months to a year for another supplier list to become available. Like one of them is G-Cloud 14, and the next one is going to be G-Cloud 15. Now, the way the government moves is so slow in comparison to what I'm seeing in the US. In US, people move much faster, from companies all the way to the government itself. Whereas like in the UK, everything is a lot slower, and it's all to do with the bureaucracy. And I think if they want the UK to become a hub of AI hub, I think they need to maybe remove some of these bureaucracies. But so for example, in our case, in order to become part of G-Cloud 14, we have now joined, we are going to be joining other companies that have got this, that are on that list. And then we're going to be a supplier to the government. And it's just like a loop that you got to go through, and it's such a waste of time. Now, I'm not really sure on the financial side, because financial sides, it's really dependent on the firm, and it's firm by firm. Like some firms are very much on the front office anti LLMs, And then there are others who are like willing to like allow some applications through with a lot of bounds and regulations that they've put in place, and actually doesn't come from governments. So I think, I think that's very much different from what I would say like the government is doing. And I don't think government can help with that. That is more to do with financial services, compliance procedures and regulations than anything else.
Right. Sarah and Dave, do you have any comment on that?
I think in terms of what governments need to do, I mean, might sound very boring in that sense, but it starts in school, doesn't it? It starts way back then, and we're trying to encourage, the next generation of people to become, it's second nature that they will use AI, and yet we're not necessarily training people within school to use computers and to be comfortable with them. And so it's all about how do we develop school curricula to allow this to begin with a student, even in primary school, but certainly from 11 onwards in secondary school, that they're using the techniques to benefit them as they go through the schooling, rather than just saying you can't use, okay, I'm in a university and there's lots of debates about how we can use AI in assessment and in teaching and so on. And some universities are I'm not saying banning it because it's impossible to ban, but where it's kind of frowned upon, and there's lots of issues around, authenticity of assessment and those kind of things. And so there's almost that culture of here it is, and you'll have to use this when you're in a job, and in fact, the nature of your job will change because of AI. However, we're going to tell you not to use it for the first, say, 16, 18 years of your life, unless you do a computer course. And then at university, a little bit of it, not too much. I think a whole round of issues about how we educate the next generation. Regulation in terms of financial services is also an issue, and I know it's already been mentioned by Maryam. It's updating financial regulations for what is a new world. And we know that the UK is particularly slow in dealing with, historically slow with any kind of update in regulations, and the US is fast. And we can see the real outcomes of that in terms of the divergence between the economies of Europe and the economies of the US.
Really
So
interesting. Yeah, good. Sarah?
Just to add a very quick note to what Dave and Maryam said, is that within this, AI should be a problem solver and not an exclusionary tool, because financial service or any service must cater to all demographics, including undeserved or any marginal or any ethnic groups. And I think consumer research here is really essential to identify the gaps where AI may fail to serve a diverse financial needs, and to kind of ensure that solutions are built with equity and accessibility in mind, so we don't actually leave people behind while kind of furthering technology and AI use in a number of different sectors.
Really interesting. I mean, one of the ideas the previous government had was this whole smart data roadmap that they came up with, a smart data policy, right? So they were going to enable kind of a big bang in cross-sector data, for example, between energy, banking, and transport, right? So we had a question come in about that. And the question is, what role can AI agents play in advancing the UK smart data policy, particularly in these cross-sector schemes, while addressing challenges such as regulatory compliance, consumer trust, and equitable data access, which is something I think you were just talking about, Sarah, right? Don't know, does anybody have any thoughts on that one?
I think it depends on what you want to do with that data. I mean, if the data, and what type of a data is it? Is it like structured? Is it unstructured? If it is it semi-structured? Like, I haven't seen that data before, so I assume that there are a lot of semi-structured, structured data. Now, I think, is it really important to use agents in order to cross, like, you know, like, I don't know, link between two sets of structured data. I don't think you need very expensive models to do that. You can even rely on old school methodologies. But like when it comes to semi-structured or unstructured, then yes, I think you can use agents, but I think it depends on what you want to use them for. Is it for summarization? Is it for report generation? Is it for podcast generation? Is it just to give you information like in a table format? If it is just to do information in table format, then you just need to take the unstructured and structure it, and that's it. You know, you don't need like really like heavy duty like models to run these like sort of answers. So it depends on what you want to do with the agents, I think.
Yeah, I mean, that said, AI agents are great at translating data from one format to another, aren't they?
And also how that data is used and transparency within the user of how they're going to be using their data. And I think that's kind of the boundaries needs to be established.
Yeah, very good, very good. Right, maybe we're sort of coming up on closing time, but maybe you could give your thoughts just in closing on what you see are the most urgent challenges. You know, bearing in mind that UKFin is all about addressing these kind of persistent challenges, right? So if you had to highlight some challenges that you think are still outstanding and need to be tackled with regard to AI and financial services, like, I don't know what each of our panel members would say about what they see as most important. And maybe Sarah, we can start with you.
Sure. I think, and I'm going to draw on a point that Dave made about educating and education. So I think educating industry and both industry and users about AI's limitations and boundaries, whether it's about, you know, avoiding over-reliance, many in the financial industry assume that, you know, AI is inevitable, you know, we can just trust it. So I think just having that kind of boundaries and understanding and, you know, understanding their blind spots as well. And of course, regulatory compliance. You know, AI models often function, as mentioned before, as, you know, black boxes. So again, creating compliance and ethical dilemmas, you know, and so forth to be able to understand the mechanisms behind decision making. And I think risk awareness as well. You know, being able to kind of open that a little bit. And, you know, in a sense where we kind of need to know whether we need to redefine some of these concepts and know what those boundaries are. So I think that's one of the key things.
Brilliant, brilliant. Thank you. David?
Yeah, I think what I would say, and it kind of touches on quite a lot of the bits that we've talked about, and that's this issue of democratization of data and AI. And I think one of the amusing things from a markets perspective that occurred obviously last week, the launch of DeepSeek and how that kind of threw everything, the proverbial cat amongst the pigeons, and Nvidia's share price fell, and lots of people, particularly around ChatGPT, got all excited about it. Now, whatever the truth behind DeepSeek is in terms of whether it's as cheap as they claim and where they get their chips from and so on, what's important is that issue going forward, and that is this, you know, the idea of democratization of AI. That is, people have access to it. And it was in one of the previous questions about equitable access, and everyone has trust as much as possible. It's open as much as possible. It's reliable. It's trustworthy. It's transparent, and that people are able to use it and not be excluded from some parts of it. So that also includes what we talked about before with financial literacy, with understanding. When you're getting involved in this, you understand the risks associated with it, as well as the benefits that obviously there are many. And that. So it's about inclusivity rather than trying to say, well, this is a thing that I understand and you don't, so I'll benefit from it and you won't. So the greater that is opened up, and again, the origins of ChatGPT are not where it is now in terms of, you know, how much they charge and so on. And so it is kind of trying to maintain that openness. Democratization seems to be the word that's used. And I think that's the main issue going forward.
Brilliant. Thanks, David. And Maryam?
So I think last night I was having a meeting with one of the chairmen of a financial institution, and it was very fascinating because I had to actually give him an analogy of when you are developing a quant finance model, you spend 80% of your time on data and 20% on the model. And then overall, if your model is, and your data is of great quality and your model is generalized, even if the regime changes, you still should get very good outputs. And I think a lot of people have stopped looking at LLMs as algorithms, and they're looking at them as like this magical instrument that will solve everything, and you can put and throw at it any sort of data. And they have forgotten that data is actually the most important part of these models, and you still need to do that 80% data work, and that model would be like the 20% of the work. Maybe not that split, actually. I would say like you would have a data team that works 100% on the data, and a machine learning team that will work 100% on the algorithms and the architectures. But you still need to have that focus on data, and I think a lot of people have stopped having that focus on data. So for example, with this person, he was like, I'm just going to throw a live transcript into summarization and see what I would get. And I was like, well, you will most likely get wrong outputs because that's just raw data and you haven't done anything to it. And he just didn't understand it. And it was hard for him to like bring his mind around and understanding that there's additional work you need to do to data for it to provide accuracy. And I think these are the things that just doesn't happen in the market. They don't discuss these.
We also need to be careful not to throw AI generated data into training AI, generative AI systems, right? Because the quality degrade, right?
Absolutely. And I think that's what's happening now. There's a lot of outputs that are going out on the web that are AI generated, well, LLM generated. And I think that data then gets fed back into the system. So then you have low quality outputs basically generated, very generalized information rather than detailed knowledge that is actually required by industry,
Fantastic. Well, listen, I just want to say thank you very much to all of the panel for all of your insights. That was really good. If you enjoyed this, we've got some more events coming. We're going to have another Wicked Lunch, this time on quantum computing on Wednesday, the 19th of February. Do join us for that. There's also going to be one on decentralized finance and blockchain on Wednesday, the 5th of March, right? And then we're going to be looking at putting all of these emerging technologies together, right? All the exciting combinations in which AI, blockchain, and quantum computing can be jointly exploited, shall we say. And that's going to be happening as an in-person event at Imperial on Wednesday, the 26th of March. So if you are available for that, please do sign up for that as well. I'd just like to thank for everybody online. Everybody's asked a question. Everybody has just listened patiently and enjoyed the event. It's been super having you aboard, and we look forward to next time. Do enjoy the rest of your day. Thanks, everybody.